You, me, and HIFMB. Stories of Science and the Sea.
Hello, welcome back and Happy New Year, everybody. This time we have something different for you. Actually, we flipped tables today, and Kimberly Peters from episode 3, I believe, interviewed me today. So, this is an episode where you get to know more about me as a researcher, and I hope you like it. This time we're not actually highlighting one of my core pieces. We're just going through my CV, and Kim asked me a range of questions about interdisciplinarity, how I got where I am, and a bunch of cool surprise questions at the end. So definitely stay tuned until the end. And without further ado, let's get rolling. Happy 2024.
Rolling. We're rolling.
Yeah.
Hello, dear listeners. I have something very special for you today. The tables are being turned, and we have today in the hot seat for our HIFMB podcast none other than Jan.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Jan. I think it's about time we give some airtime to your work, don't you think?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
If you think it's time.
I think it's time. Jan has very kindly been giving so much time to everyone else's work in the HIFMB, which has been phenomenal in helping us understand the wide range of work that goes on within the walls of our institute, but also understanding other things such as what's going on with the landscape of postdoctoral life and experience in terms of what's going on with our PhD community. So yeah, it's definitely time. It's time, Jan. It's time. It's time. So shall I kick off?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got lots of questions for you.
Shoot.
I think it's really important that our listeners know a bit more about you.
Okay.
So Jan, you're the voice of our podcast. You are normally in the question seat. I hope you're feeling nervous.
Yeah.
There you are. Good. Oh, like every good interviewer, I like to put people at their ease. So I'm interested in how well our listeners really know their host. And I wondered if you could start by just telling us a little bit about you.
Yeah.
About you as a researcher, Jan.
Sure.
How did you come to be in our institute?
Yeah. So basically that all started with, I think with my dad. Let's start with my dad, because he started.
That's surprising. That's such a nice start. I wasn't. This is why we do this, everyone.
Yeah.
These surprise answers. I'm going to start with my dad. Okay.
So yeah, my dad, Ulf. Hi, Dad. Hi, Pa. He started diving at some point. I don't even remember when, but that got me interested in diving. So then I started diving, and all of a sudden I wanted to become a marine biologist. So I then went to Australia, to Townsville, JCU, James Cook University, and studied marine biology because I wanted to. At that point, I was already a dive master, so I could, at the time, work as a dive master and study marine biology in Australia, in English for the first time, so it's not my native language. Then from there, so Townsville is on the verge of the tropics, and doesn't have seasons. It's got the wet season and the dry season. And I was really missing seasons. So then when it came to picking a master's program, I wanted to go back to where there's seasons. So I went back to Europe, went to Bremen in the north of Germany, and studied marine biology also. So that's the Masters of Marine Biology in Bremen. Then finished that, did my thesis in Thailand. So throughout my career, I was always, because I worked on coral reefs a lot, so that kind of became my thing, coral reef ecologist. Did my thesis work in Thailand, then came back to Bremen and worked as a research assistant for a year at ZMT, the Center for Marine Tropical Ecology in Bremen also. They basically at that time, then there's this time where as a master's student you have to score a PhD somewhere, and there was a really cool post advertised in Lancaster in England with Nick Graham. Hi Nick, my my second dad. my PhD dad basically, and he advertised a position on feedback processes. So kind of like feedback loops, like when you have A affecting B and then B affects A again, that's a feedback loop. And those exist on coral reefs. Like, for instance, when you have algae overgrowing reefs, and they grow so dense that all of a sudden, normally they're getting fed on by herbivorous fish, so by plant-eating fish. And normally they control them quite well so that they don't overgrow the reef. But then if they get too dense, for some reason the fish don't want to eat them anymore and don't care anymore and don't act as lawnmowers. And then they overgrow the reef, and that's a feedback process. Like they self-reinforce. And I was studying that basically with Nick, with fieldwork in the Seychelles, so that was really nice. But at the time, then I was really ecology. So I was all natural sciences. Didn't read about social sciences at all. But then at the time, I worked a lot with other PhDs from Lancaster, with Anna Woodhead and Marlene Schutter, for instance, and they work with Christina Hicks, and she is a social scientist. And there came the thought in my head that the natural sciences are being too exclusive, and if you want to really do conservation right, you need to include people. And that's when I wanted to include social science into my arsenal, into my research.
And you did that through your PhD?
I did, yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Nick gave me a lot of freedom. I also worked with the Stockholm Resilience Center a lot, so they co-funded my PhD, and they allowed me to kind of expand into the social ecological realm. So social ecological is like what they call interdisciplinarity or interdisciplinary sciences. So I'm taking aspects of social sciences and ecological sciences and merge them in my research. And so I looked at social ecological feedback processes on the reefs of Jamaica. So feedbacks between people and the reef, and how they have degraded over time the reef process. And pretty much got interested in social sciences and or more interdisciplinarity. And then that was the final chapter of my PhD. I wrote them all up, and then HIFMB published their position for a postdoctoral position. So the one I'm currently in, or not really the one I'm currently in, I'm in a new one now, but the one that was called Morisco, so the Morisco project, that was social ecological feedback processes at its core. And really, I could apply the research that I had done on Jamaican reefs. I could apply them very well to what they wanted me to do here, but in the sphere of biodiversity science. So then I applied for the position while I was still finishing my PhD, writing it up. I applied for the position and miraculously got it. Like, I applied for many positions that I didn't get, but this one I did get. And it was in Oldenburg, so very close to Bremen, where I had already lived. So I moved back to Bremen during the pandemic. That's in 2020. So in 2020 now, I applied for the position, finished my PhD during the pandemic. Had actually to move back into my parents' house because I had to move out of Britain. Because when the pandemic started, I guess I thought, oh God, this is going to take a while. So, and I was on the finishing end of my PhD, so I wanted to move, and Brexit happened, so I wanted to move back to the EU. And yeah, I was staying with my parents while finishing my PhD, finished it, started the new position immediately. And yeah, then pretty much that got me to where I am now. So the Morisco project looks at biodiversity change and what that means for people, basically. And on the coast, though, so coastal marine biodiversity change and what it means for people.
And that's really begun to frame your work now, this
Yes.
relationship with people.
Exactly.
But I want to scoot back a bit first,
Okay,
if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry.
Because I'm sorry, I've got too many interesting questions that come out of that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm going to start by saying, first of all, Jan, I didn't realise we have a shared history of basically moving back home for that final stage of your PhD.
Yeah.
I wonder how many other people listening also did that. You know, this moment of having to go somehow home whilst you've been out and independent and doing your own thing and then going back. But that gets me thinking about locations. I mean, you've done some work in some nice locations.
I have, yes, definitely.
You know, we've got an undergraduate in Australia.
Yeah.
We've got Jamaica was mentioned. I think Thailand cropped up a little bit.
Yeah.
How are you finding Oldenburg?
Oldenburg's nice. No, it's actually a really cool. It's a really cool city. For the size, it feels a lot larger than it is, but you can reach everything by bike. It's amazing. Short of the weather, that's not so amazing. But in summer, it's good.
Yeah, in summer it is good. So, I mean, as you have sort of mentioned, getting around and transport, this is not the best seg, but anyway, I'm going to keep going with it.
Sorry.
One thing I was quite interested, where you started with diving, right? So what's the best thing about diving? I'm not a diver. I've actually never been diving. So what is it about diving that enabled you to build this fascination with underwater worlds, with the marine environment, with what you're doing now? Like, what's it like to dive?
Yeah, it's incredibly relaxing. And although it is, so once you're underwater, it's incredibly relaxing, but everything leading up to that is can be stressful. And you feel like you go out on a Zodiac, for instance, and you go off the side, jump off the sides, roll, backwards roll, or something like that. You have a lot of gear on, you feel cool. And then but then once you're underwater, it becomes incredibly relaxing, and all of a sudden you're in a different world. You see, let's say you're on a coral reef. I learned how to dive in a little pond in Germany, which was just green. But let's say you're on a coral reef, you experience all of a sudden a new world. It looks like a little alien city, and that like the corals are the houses, and all of a sudden you see the fish flying over the city, swimming over the city. And you just become naturally curious and want to find out more about this miraculous space that makes you so relaxed. Yeah, it's really intriguing. I don't know. For the first time diving with my dad, I think I was intrigued and wanted to know more. And
do you still dive now?
Yes, yeah. We go diving all the time.
Where?
Various places. Last summer we went to Egypt, for instance. Yeah, that was nice.
So that's the best thing about diving. And is it any part of your work now? Is it something you would like to build into your work in the future?
I've done a lot of field work already on coral reefs, and I've dived a lot for like 3,000 research dives or something. It's 2,000, maybe 3,000 in total. But I've had a good run with fieldwork. I think now is the time since the pandemic. I haven't really looked back to doing fieldwork because I kind of adapted to the new lifestyle of the pandemic and analyzed other people's data. It was handy at the time because we couldn't go on expeditions, so we had to analyze other people's data that were already collected. And I kind of adapted to that, and I like it. I now I'm in my current position. I'm kind of advising policymakers and decision makers. It's a cool transition I've done. I would go back and do some field work, but I think right now my time is more worthwhile spent not doing field work and focusing on the advising thing. Yeah.
And I mean, it's so interesting you say that. There's a wonderful quote that's in a book that I really like that's about social science methods, and it says that people often miss the opportunity of what they can do in their own chair, basically, because of this prominence that's given to field work, that's where the best knowledge comes from, or the most close knowledge that we can get of something. And of course that's one way of looking at it, but there's many other ways in which we can access understandings of our world. And I think, again, that's part of this richness of this institute, is the different ways in which people go about their work. There are people who do embedded field work. There are people who use a variety of data sets and sources that are already out there. And using virtual methods as well. You know, even when we work with people, for example, we might not always go and do it in the field. We might use Skype interviews or or another platform provider. So those are quite interesting things. So I've asked you what was best about diving. What was best about Britain?
About Britain?
Yeah.
The nature is so underrated. I really fell in love with hiking and camping outdoors and with my friends in Britain we went to so many caves in the lake. Like Lancaster's really close to the Lake District, and that's so nice. It's such a nice area. Britain's nature I never you never hear about outside of Britain, and then once you're there, incredible. And also the pub culture. I'm really missing that.
So, but the beer is better in Germany.
The beer is far better in Germany.
Beer's better in Germany.
But the
again, things we agree on, Jan.
I don't know. The British vibe is in the pub. Not necessarily about alcohol, but just the happiness and the cheerfulness and singing along to songs. I miss that.
Well, we can try and create a little bit in this podcast.
Yes,
but you know, we've got some fun and games coming later, everyone.
Okay.
But I want to go back again to this point you were saying about this almost this transition you've made in your career, which is really interesting, where you have shifted from, as you say, being a kind of quite hardcore coral reef ecologist to then being really interested in, well, what does this mean for conservation? What does this mean for people? What does this mean for policy? What does this mean for change? What does this mean in our world as it is? And so you occupy this kind of interesting in-between space. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about this shift to policy.
Absolutely.
Why it's so interesting to you, and what your kind of hopes are, maybe in the projects you've been working on or are working on, in terms of what you think your work can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I thank you for asking that. I think there's a quite a negative divide that is even, especially in Germany, I feel it currently, a divide between nature and people, or nature and culture. So I think that split isn't healthy when it comes to conservation. There's this term floating around, fortress conservation, where you actively exclude people from nature in order to get nature to its intrinsic values, or get the intrinsic values of nature back. But I think that's not a future-proof concept. I think as the human population grows on the planet, there's very little space that is pristine and that is untouched by humans. So we need to really get to grips with how we conserve nature together with people. So, and the concept of people and nature that really came to the forefront during, like I said, during my PhD. And I think with interdisciplinarity, you reach far more, and you can include far more voices in your research. So I think we get further with interdisciplinarity, social ecological methods, and that means including people, means including social science, because I think excluding people is should be a thing of the past, and we need to get people involved in conservation, like stewardship, for instance. I'm currently working on a project that explores relational values of people and nature, so the bidirectionality of people and nature, and people display an incredible amount of stewardship once they are let into nature, and then they do care for it a lot, but you need to let them. And I think that's where I see my research positioned a little bit in this more inclusive, more future-proof way of conservation.
And have there been any challenges in making this step? Like, what have you found interesting or intriguing or challenging about making this move? Yeah,
I think that the most intriguing part about it is learning about social science methods at first, and how very different natural sciences and social sciences can be at times, and coming to grips with qualitative data, because I'm a very quantitative scientist by training, but now really experiencing, like through a survey we've done recently where there were some open-ended questions, and the responses you get are so invaluable. Like you really can take a whole quote of a person who has been working their whole life on the Wadden Sea, for instance, and you get more out of that one sentence than you would get out of a set of numbers. So really bringing that to the forefront, that those social science methods and how much worth they are, that at first was a challenge, and now it's really rewarding, I think.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? it's what it gives you. It's not, it doesn't have to be an either or. It's the fact that it gives you
Exactly.
depth.
Yeah.
It gives you it maybe allows you to answer the question of why. So we can see how something has happened, perhaps with some quantitative data. We can see how things take shape, but why has that happened, or what has led to that? And speaking with people and allowing them to say things in their own words is, as you say, it's really valuable. But it's exactly what you're saying as well, though, is it's a different system of knowledge, of thinking about what knowledge counts. And so, I mean, that's a challenge for policy, because policymakers, of course, like things that are very certain. You know, they do like numbers, they do like figures. I mean, what's your view on that? How do you think there's a possibility to incorporate more voices into the policy landscape?
I do hope we can come up with some creative ways on how to include them, but I also get I really understand the policymaker side of things on wanting more graspable, more practical advice from us. And I do hope that's exactly the making something that is inherently really complex quite graspable and understandable for policymakers. And that's exactly where I see my research positioned now, is very applied policy science interface work. So making it more applied, but also not losing the complexity of those voices. That would be ideal in an ideal world. And that's what we're trying to work towards.
And that gets me to a kind of, I guess, quite a big question. Obviously, this topic is very close to my heart, but, you know, we know that there's lots and lots of policy. There's tons of policy. There's lots and lots out there. We're creating new regulations, new guidance, new laws around how the marine environment is managed and how it is governed. And that presents challenges in terms of, you know, does it function? Does it work? You know, we can provide all this information, but does it actually do anything? You know, and that's something that potentially, you know, keeps me awake at night.
Yeah, me too.
So, you know, what do you think are the main challenges facing marine policy? And do you have any suggestions? Like how can some of the things that we know and we understand across the social sciences and the natural sciences and the range of those disciplines we do here, how can that best do its work in a policy sphere? What do we need to do? What do we need to change? What are the answers, Jan?
I don't know the answers.
How do we save the world?
Again, in that recent survey we've done, we've found that, especially when it comes to marine biodiversity change, the most impacted nature's contributions to people, we call them, the most impacted ones are the ones who are the non-material values that people derive from nature. So that would be cultural values, experiences like touristic experiences or identities. Things of that nature will be the ones that take the biggest hit when biodiversity changes. But currently, our policies are all aligned towards the material things, like the fish we catch in the ocean, or even the regulating nature's contributions to people. So what it means for the climate, if this many phytoplankton species change or move away from the Wadden Sea, what does that mean for the climate regulation? Those things we kind of have on our radar, but the non-material things we don't have on our radar, and we need to include them in policies more. And that means
that's very welcome to hear.
Yeah, definitely. So and that means including more social science methods and more qualitative methods into the policy sphere. I think at a recent talk that I did, you mentioned the disturbing figure of only 7% of social sciences are being funded, or what was the exact number?
Yeah, I think it comes from a recent paper that I think has come out in Nature Sustainability, and it's that of the marine sciences, only 7, I can't remember the exact quote, it's 7 point something percent is marine social sciences.
Yeah, exactly.
Yet everything that you've been saying is aligned to this idea that, okay, well, we've got all this scientific knowledge, but it can't do anything unless we understand how policy works. It can't do anything unless it gets to policymakers. It can't do anything unless it's somehow enacted in some way, which requires people, right? And understanding people.
Exactly.
But 7 point something. I'm sorry, listeners.
Yeah, no, I'm
7
not
point
prepared, sorry.
7 point something percent. And so, I mean, and that partly comes down to the question of funding.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, very much so. So that is another big challenge that I see is there needs to be more funding made available to interdisciplinary projects or social science projects or marine social sciences need to be more included in the policy sphere. There's just no way around it. And another challenge that I see is at the moment for marine conservation, we only seem to have one tool, which is marine protected areas, MPAs we call them, and a big question that from me stems from that, because there's many flaws with MPAs, because it's the sea is very interconnected. You can't separate it as well as you can a forest with a fence. The big challenge here is there even a tool that we can come up with that isn't an MPA? Is there anything other than MPAs? Because I certainly right now don't have the answers, but I want this question to be addressed. Are there things other than anything that isn't as bordered as you would have it on the land? Maybe something like that floats around in my head. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think thinking about those kinds of practical things, that again, going back to that point
Exactly.
you were making about things being applied.
Exactly, it needs to be practical, of course, not just a theoretical thing from the top of my head, but perhaps we can come up with something. Maybe that's a big question for the future. Is there something other than MPAs?
And for our institute, I think, as well. So I think we've learned a little bit about you, Jan, which was the aim of this. Diver.
Yeah.
Well, son. So, academic son and actual son.
I'm a son.
Diver. Policy passionate. Mm-hmm. Would you count yourself a social scientist, Jan?
I'm. If you want to have me, I'll gladly join.
He's on board, everyone. Yeah. He's on board. So, talking about working with people, though. You've worked with people quite a lot now in your research, working with policymakers, working with everyday people. You've also been involved in teaching and mentoring. We'll get to that in just a moment. But what's been the most surprising thing you've learned about working with people? Because I know what some of the most, surprising things have been about working with people, perhaps unsurprising things about working with people. But what's it been for you?
I think, so in the Morisco project, we've worked a lot with stakeholders. So that is policymakers from the area, actually, so from Lower Saxony, that govern the Wadden Sea, the Lower Saxon part of the Wadden Sea. Germany is very federal and very structured and divided. So even the Wadden Sea, the management of the Wadden Sea is divided between states. And the Lower Saxon part of the managers, we've worked with them. And they've been incredibly engaged and incredibly, they've been such a useful resource for us. And they've helped so much with our research. But they didn't get funded from our project. So they were involved in our project, but they didn't see anything from the funding. And the problem is that whenever they wanted to join a workshop from us, they pretty much had to take time off their actual work to join our workshop. So I think in the future, the biggest learning for me was, in the future, scientific projects that involve stakeholders need to make funding available for the stakeholders. They need to be paid for the work they do.
Yeah, and I mean, there's lots of debates about kind of, what can be offered to stakeholders, and how much is taken from stakeholders in terms of just wanting expertise, but at the same time what is given back to them as well. So I think that's a really core and crucial method. And so we've been talking about working with people. One thing that has been really wonderful that we've also been involved with together, but you've also done very much independently as well. You've been very much involved in mentoring through the GSS scheme, the Global Sustainability Scholars Scheme. Yeah. Thank you very much. No, that's a wonderful scheme.
Yeah, definitely.
For bringing international scholars to institutes to learn about what happens within interdisciplinary or disciplinary sciences, depending on where those scholars land. So you've been really involved in that. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about it and some of the highlights of particularly working with what's been a group of really amazing young people.
Yeah, there were. So the GSS, or the Global Sustainability Scholars, is a theme or a scheme by the Belmont Forum, who we were funded by. And they pretty much make a stipend available to young scholars who are in between their bachelor's and their master's, or their master's and their PhD. And then they come to our institution and work with us. And some of the highlights definitely in that were so we had 3 years was the project. So we had 3 cohorts of students. And each had their own highlights. So the first one was Gabriel Gadsden, Gabe, who we work very closely with, and he did an incredible academic review of stakeholders, and he joined us during the pandemic. So that was the absolute massive challenge of first getting him here, and then having him have a nice time, or making him have a nice time. While he's in pandemic Germany. And he how do you say in German is wie sagt man? And he always came to me and said, wie sagt man cereal? Or wie sagt man microphone? Things like that. And that I always remember this from Gabe. He was incredible. And then, like I said, each cohort had their own moments. Then we had out of pandemic times. And then we had Valeria and Marilyn join, so Valeria Menendez and Marilyn Smith, and they worked on the survey that I mentioned before, and really they challenged me so much on getting that there we are again talking about the complexity thing. So I always wanted the survey to be more complex in order to get more scientific knowledge out of it, but they wanted it less complex so that more stakeholders would feel enabled to fill it out, and I think we made a good bridge on coming together. I think we could have simplified it more in the end, so they were correct in the end, the students. And Valeria and Marilyn, they also came to a trip on Speaker Oak with Helmut and me. So our institute head, who is also the head of the Morisco project, we all went to Speaker Oak and had a great time for a day. And then in the last year, we had Alifair joining, who did the fact sheet, which is currently the only output on the transfer office website. She did that, and she pretty much summarized everything that the Morisco project had done up to that point as a fact sheet. So fact sheets on or facts on biodiversity change, basically. And she is actually so with all of them we're. I'm currently writing up the study for the survey with Marilyn and Valeria, and Alifair I will now join in Barcelona on the UN Ocean Decade Conference. She's presenting our work there, so I'm still in contact with all of them, and that's pretty much my highlight. It's an incredible group. I haven't had one bad experience. They're all incredible scholars, and I wish them all the best. They're cool people, really cool people.
And you've highlighted something as well that's really crucial about any form of kind of supervision, is that it's almost like a lifetime commitment.
Yeah.
You know, I think students I supervised many years ago, they still email me saying, I'm applying for a new job. Would you write a reference? And you're like, exactly. Oh, hi, how are you doing? What's going on? So it's those connections that you build throughout and it's so special with the GSS scheme because it's international, because it brings scholars to give those scholars themselves these opportunities to work in the environment that we have here, and so it's a really fantastic scheme.
Exactly.
So I mean, have you found that you've got, from that experience of what's technically supervision, I guess, right? Because you're working on projects with these students, you're guiding them through doing academic projects, be they writing literature reviews, producing fact sheets,
surveys, putting
surveys together. Has that given you a bit of a passion for teaching?
Absolutely, it totally has. During my PhD, I received incredible supervision by Nick Graham and Magnus.
Academic dad.
Yeah, my academic dad and Magnus Nyström from Stockholm Resilience Center, and they were incredible mentors, and that kind of raised the bar for me to kind of give that back to the academic youth, so to say. I don't know.
We've made ourselves sound very old, Jan.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the thing that's wonderful about any form of teaching or supervision, is that it's kind of not hierarchical. It's always a dialogue.
Yeah.
I think every year I teach a module and I'm like, wow, I hadn't thought about it like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the thing, it's not I think the days of teaching in a way that's very top down, I will bestow my knowledge on you, are kind of gone, because there's always these beautiful moments with supervision where of course your students become the experts as well, and they're kind of saying, well, actually maybe we could think about it like this or
exactly
like that.
Yeah,
and so
like when I read what the paper that Gabe wrote, for instance, he words things so nicely, and I always thought when I read parts of his paper, it's like, oh wow, you can write it like you can write like that, that's incredible. And took some of his writing as a for or as a blueprint for me to write.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
And it's so important because rightly, that these are generations of scholars who will who are going to enrich and inform all the disciplines that we work in. Oh, it's exciting times. So I think we've learned quite a lot about you as a scientist, Jan. It's been really interesting actually to think about your trajectory from diving with your dad, which I think was such a nice start point to actually thinking about how, something that you do with another person, and then that you've come back to this sort of peopled research and working with people. But I know that you're not just an awesome scientist. I know this. I also know you're a very high-level lacrosse player. Is this correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Well, very high level. That depends on who you ask.
If you're asking me, I'm saying high level.
Yeah. So
yeah. So my question is, I mean, obviously, how do you balance this career with, staying kind of, that healthy work-life balance, Jan?
Yeah, exactly. It's a good point that you raised.
No, because you're getting busier and busier. Every time I'm like, oh, Jan's working on other papers, on another project. How do you keep that balance?
Yeah, it's actually so obviously the job is still the priority, but up to this point, lacrosse or sports in general have always been a great outlet for stress, and are always a nice ending or start, depending on when you do it, to the day. And like we are now trying to build a little lacrosse club here in Oldenburg, and we have really cool people who joined. And it's always nice, like on a Tuesday night, you for the whole working day, you kind of look forward to that end of the day, that you get to teach people lacrosse, the sport that you fell in love with. It's nice. It's a really cool offset to all the stress you pile up during the day. Yeah.
Why lacrosse? And also, our listeners, could you describe lacrosse for us, Jan?
Oh God, it's
just in case people don't know.
Yeah, it's like a mix of handball, if you know that, basketball and ice hockey. So you can go, you're wearing protective gear like a helmet and gloves, and you have a stick in your hand that looks a little bit like you're going to catch butterflies. And then you catch a ball with that and you pass it between you so it flies through the air. It doesn't go like a puck on ice, and you play on grass on a football field. You have goals that are 180 by 180 meters. Then you try to get that ball into the goal, where there's also a goalie in the goal who can save it. And the movement looks a lot like basketball, so you're going up and down the field. Okay. Yeah. I mean, how do I balance it? I'm next month actually I'm going to going to Portugal for the Eurolax tournament with the Germans. So hopefully I can stay active up to lacrosse. Actually, fun fact, just got Olympic. So we're an Olympic sport.
This is so exciting.
Yeah.
Do we have an Olympian within our midst?
No, not yet. No. So the first time it will
Watch
be
this space.
Yeah. The next time it will be Olympic will be in 2028. Okay. So if I can stay active until then, let's see.
Wow. Yeah. That's so exciting. What a development for both Jan and for the sport of lacrosse.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
well,
why lacrosse? It's a good mix of many attributes. You have to be really agile. You have to be quite strong at times because it's physical. You can check each other. But you also have to be quite aware and make clever moves at times. So it combines a lot of things. It's nice. Yeah.
And you can also re-listen to that as career advice as well.
Yeah.
Be strong, stay agile.
Yes. Stay on your feet.
Oh, Jan, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you
Likewise.
and learning so much about your work and your contributions. And I will use this opportunity to thank you for instigating the amazing podcast that we have here at HIFMB.
Thank you.
I'm going to finish
Okay.
with... I've got a little surprise segment for you.
Yeah, let's go.
Jan. So what I'm going to do, okay, I don't know if you've ever played this game. I don't know if our listeners have ever played this game. I'm going to ask you 15 questions.
Okay, 15.
Okay,
Jeez.
there's 15. Yeah,
All right.
there's 15. And you have to answer immediately.
Okay.
Okay? So I'm
Okay.
going to give you 2 options. You just answer one. Have you ever played this? It's super fun.
No.
So
I get 2 options.
you get 2 options.
Right,
You just
okay.
have to immediately. It's
Yeah.
just literally, it's quick,
Yeah.
straight in
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
Okay? And this is the way we're going to get to know Jan the best at the end of today's interview. Okay. 1. Sweet or savoury?
Sweet.
Still or sparkling?
Sparkling.
Hot or cold?
Oh, cold?
Flip-flops or sliders?
Flip-flops.
Beach or mountains?
Oui. Beach.
Football or rugby?
Rugby.
Ooh, which team?
Rugby team? South Africa.
Oh. Museum or art gallery?
Ooh, art gallery.
Rock or easy listening?
Rock.
Ed Sheeran or Taylor Swift?
Oh, Tay-Tay.
He's a Swiftie.
Yeah.
Okay, and now to work. Plants or animals?
Animals.
Plankton or platypus?
Platypus. I've never seen one, actually.
Oh!
I bet they're incredible.
Sea or shore?
Oh, shore.
Oh. Boat or submarine?
Boat.
Salmon or trout?
Trout?
Kim or helmet?
Oh, that's that. I can't answer that one. Pass.
Oh, pass. He wasn't expecting that one as the last one. No. Jan, you've been a very good sport. We've
you.
talked about everything from your career to sport. And I'll just say it again. It's been a total pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Likewise. Have a good one.
Want to dive deeper? Surf over to hifmb.de or follow us on Twitter at hifmb_OL.